My name is Richard Ovenden, and I have the wonderful job title of Bodley's Librarian at the Bodleian Libraries, the University of Oxford. And that means I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the university's research library system. And that system actually dates back to 1320, when the first university library was officially founded through a gift made by Thomas Bodley, the Bishop of Worcester, which provided money for the construction of a building attached to the university church and for the payment of a man who was the university librarian, but also the chaplain to the university. So very much a kind of religious post. And the university was essentially a religious institution at that time. The library then grew with gifts, including from the original foundation gift from Thomas Bodley. But over time, over the subsequent 200 years or so, there were a series of gifts, one of them transformational in the middle of the 15th century from a man called Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, who was the brother of Henry V, and who gave over 200 books to the university to add to the original collection. And that meant that the room built by Thomas Bodley in the university church was too small, and a new building had to be built, which actually still exists. It's called Duke Humphrey's Library today, a marvelous 15th century room built to house and preserve the Central University's growing collection. In the middle of the 16th century, that library was visited by the commissioners of Edward VI in the second wave of the Protestant Reformation, and the books there were destroyed almost entirely as being considered to be either old-fashioned or heretical and religiously inconsistent with the phase of the Protestant Reformation that was sweeping through England at the time. In the end of the 16th century, a man called Sir Thomas Bodley came along. He'd been educated at the university. He had been an exile during the reign of Mary Tudor, who brought Catholicism back to England briefly in the 1550s. But then he and his family had returned to England after Elizabeth I acceded the throne. And he became a successful businessman, but also a diplomat in the court of Elizabeth I, visiting on official government business some of the German states, including the Palatinate and the Low Countries. And he came back to Oxford in 1598 and found the original library room that was wrecked by the commissioners of Edward VI, found that room, as he said in his autobiography, as having been laid waste. And he committed himself to renewing the library, not only restoring the building, restocking it with books, designing new bookshelves and a system for arranging the books in the room, but also endowing the post of keeper of the library. And that is the job that I now have. I'm the 25th person since the first person to be employed under the new regime of the library, which was endowed by Sir Thomas in 1600. So that first librarian was called Thomas James, and he worked very closely with his founder to establish the library, to make it a success, to fill it with books, and to ensure that our founder endowed it for what he called the augmentation of books, for the stipends of officers, and for other pertinent occasions. And that endowment was quickly spent in the form of a loan to King Charles I during the English Civil War, which was recorded as a debt in our annual accounts until 1798, when it was written off. But despite that error of judgment, the library actually established itself quickly as a very successful an important institution. Along with the Ambrosian Library in Milan, it was effectively the only public library in Europe at the time, a library which Sir Thomas founded for what he called the whole Republic of the Learned. So anybody, it wasn't a private library for the university, anybody who could articulate a need to visit it and to use its collections could access it. They were all men, so this was a sense of the public very different to the one that we have today. But nevertheless, it was very different, more open than the other libraries in Europe at the time. The other important thing that Sir Thomas did was to establish the library as a deposit library, and that was the foundation of what we now call legal deposit. Legal deposit is officially where every book published in the United Kingdom has to be deposited in my library. That began, as I said, in 1610 as an unofficial arrangement. It was enshrined in law in the licensing acts of the 1660s and 1670s, and then in the Copyright Act of Queen Anne in 1710. And that continues to be enforced today. That means we receive 1,000 new books every day from publishers in both physical and digital format. And that privilege was extended in 1710 to other libraries in the United Kingdom. And indeed today there are 6 libraries in the UK and 1 in the Republic of Ireland that receive those legal deposit copies. But the library today is one that is a mixture of both a university library and a university research library to that effect, but serving one of the great research universities on the planet, with a massive digital profile, serving digital journals, digital books, digital data to the university's research community, supporting the learning of undergraduates and taught graduate students. And then, particularly through digitization, through exhibitions and publications, serving the international community of the learned, or anybody who wishes to learn from our collections. And we interpret that mission very broadly today. So we welcome school groups, local schools, we welcome families, and through digitization, we encourage anybody who has any desire or need to use our collections to engage with them, to download them, to interact with them online, as well as coming physically into the library today.